the last poem in this book is a very long poem that Harold wrote called HOMO. And it started in 1984. He was in Amsterdam at a poetry reading with Eddie Woods, who ran In and Out's Press. And he and this Dutch lover he had were at the Van Gogh Museum. And Harold started falling for this guy and got into this kind of reverie of love of beautiful men and the history of homophobia. And when I knew him, he was working on HOMO as a lengthy prose poem that was supposed to document the history of homophobia. So I kind of looked at it as like DNA, like the double helix. So one strand would be the history of homophobia, church, religion, politics, and the other one being gay love and gay poetry and gay artistry. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and he put cut-ups involved in it, and collage, and it's actually not been finished. I hope one day to return to it. But in the collected poems, I did an excerpt from it. And it's actually the only poem I kind of played around with. I kind of shifted around some of the pieces. But there was one part that Harold originally called the Greek and Roman poets were gay. And we published it when I was in ACT UP. We ran a magazine called Magnus. It was kind of like a queer arts magazine. And I actually brought some copies here today. Folks are welcome to take them. They're free of charge. Each one of them has either poetry or interviews with Harold in them. But this is, I'm just going to read a short excerpt on it, because it really, for me, relates a lot of where Harold comes from as a poet, specifically as a gay poet. Anacreon, who delighted in young men, confided, "I'm old, there's no denying it. So what? Among young satyrs, I can dance as well as old Bacchus himself." When asked why his poems were always about young boys and not about gods, he replied, "That is because young boys are our gods." He was a pleasure-loving, wine-loving, boy-loving poet. Whatever Plato may say, it is unlikely that handsome Alcibiades, after sleeping beneath the same blanket as Socrates, arose intact from his embraces, Lucian wrote. Dying at 80 in the gymnasium, his head on the knee of a boy, Pindar seemed happily asleep when the attendant came to wake him. Sophocles, at 55, confessed that despite his age, he often fell in love with boys. And Aristophanes wrote that the favorite occupation of sophists and intellectuals was to make the rounds of gymnasiums to pick up boys. They went to their lessons accompanied by their little friends. At 12, a boy already appealed to them, says the great playwright. They considered him in the prime of life between 16 and 17. At 18, he was over the hill. And Harold was always about not wanting to varnish history. He translated the poems of the Roman poet Catullus, who wrote a lot of what a lot of people still consider state pornographic poems. But Harold was always reaching to the ancient because he felt that it had so much to tell us about our present world.